Jephthah's history is interesting. It says he was the son of a prostitute. It says that he was rejected by his half-brothers, who said, basically, you get nothing from us and from the family, you might as well leave. He goes off and becomes a mercenary. But the Ammonites were the people who lived next to his home region of Gilead. So imagine you've got the River Jordan flowing down the middle. You've got Jordan at one side where the Ammonites were from. The Ammonites were basically the descendants of Lot and the incestuous relationship he had with his daughter. And they became obviously a big nation. And then right across the river there was Gilead, which is where Jephthah was from. Jephthah was probably the best pronunciation of his name. I might get it wrong from time to time, just forgive me if you would. Gilead is where later Elisha actually comes from. It was really on that front line of the war because the Ammonites kept crossing over the Jordan and wrecking places. Gilead probably had about 30 towns or big cities, not big cities, towers, but cities, substantial sized dwellings. And Jephthah was asked to come back and take over control because the Ammonites had been hammering them for, I think it was 18 years. Essentially, the children of Israel had turned their back upon God. God had said, okay, so be it, look after yourselves. And when the people came back and said, we're getting hammered, God says, well, why don't you go and ask one of the foreign gods you've been praying to instead, see whether they'll deliver you. Children of Israel basically say, oh, yeah, we got it wrong, eventually scrap all the idols and everything else that they've had, and invite Jephthah back and say, right, lead us. He assembles an army, conquers the Ammonites, but he does something really dumb. Talk about the biggest dumb decision you can make. He makes a promise that he will kill and sacrifice the first thing he sees when he gets back home. Now, got to be careful here. I've heard preachers say, in fact, I've heard so many preachers say it, it became sort of embedded in my mind, really, to the effect that, you know, the plan to let a dog go, and he would have killed the dog, and that would have been, you know, that would have been it. But actually, the text doesn't say that. But I've heard so many preachers say it, I think I've even quoted that at one point in time. It's only when I've reread it again, that's not true. And of course, what happens is his daughter hears about the victory, comes out, dances, a young virgin, young child, I don't know, 10, 12, young, whatever. And of course, he's made this solemn oath to sacrifice. Now, there's been a big debate. Some people say, well, human sacrifice is going on all the time from the foreign gods that Israel had been worshipping. Maybe that practice was there. Maybe Jephthah was, he was this mercenary warrior type. Maybe he just thought that was the norm because they were so far away from God. Other people say, well, that's silly because the Israelites would never have done that. Well, whatever the truth of it, he makes this deal. His daughter turns around and says, okay, Dad, you're doing the right thing. I've got to go, but give me 2 months. 2 months to weep for my future, if you like. And so she goes out with her friends and for 2 months tours around the area, all of them weeping together. And the writer says this is why the daughters of Israel to this day, whatever that day was, still do that and celebrate once a year. This period where they lament for Jephthah's daughter. The interesting thing is that at the end of it, although it says he did what he pledged, it says she never married. And some people say that, well, maybe what it really means is that he gave her to God like Samuel later on, and she's raised at the temple and she can't marry and she's become given to God that way. Who knows? This is such a terrible time that anything, frankly, could be true. There's another little story that happens as well, which is where one of the other tribes in Israel, Ephraim, come and say, hey, why didn't you involve us in the battle? We would have gone with you. And he says, well, I invited you and you didn't come. And they say something to the effect, oh, well, right, you're getting too big for your boots. We're going to come and burn your house down with you in it. And so there's another battle and 40,000 people die and Jephthah wins again. But it's interesting because as the people are trying to escape, he's got guards around. And the big test whether they came from this tribe or not, Ephraim, was they must have been short-tongued, because the guards stop and say Shibboleth. And the Ephraim people with short tongues could only say Sibboleth. And so if they said Sibboleth, they got killed. If they said Shibboleth, it was classed as they were good guys and they could live. Well, it's a long story, I guess. But it's a dumb story in many ways. Dumb, the children of Israel stopped worshiping God. Dumb, every man did what was right in his own eyes. A huge recipe for disaster. And number 3, why do people always, when they're in that moment where they're worried for their life, make dumb promises to God? Rash promises. Promises that they really don't want to keep. And of course, today, most people don't do that. Ask all the people who've dropped in an aeroplane 10,000 feet and all prayed and got off the plane and forgot about their promises to God. Don't live like that. And don't live the life that says everyone does what's right in their own eyes. Instead, do what he says. Love God, love your neighbour, and worship him. Thank you.